Hi, Thomas. Thank you for joining us. If you don't mind, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you.
Of course. My name is Thomas Wøidemann. I am the CEO of a Danish gas company called Laris and Cozain, where I've been for the past now 18 years. I have about 25 years of experience in shipping, most of the time in Denmark, but also with a small stint in the United States, in Houston, to be more exact, where I worked as a ship broker. And then I had 4 years in Hong Kong working for a joint venture company out there. I have a wife, which is Irish, and I have a little daughter, which is 12 years old.
Awesome. Again, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you on. One of the things we're trying to, obviously, with yourself, that we're looking to try and do is to gain a wee bit more insight into the person and the people and what it takes to get CEO of a company that owns, I believe, is it 38 gas carriers? 38, is it? Yeah. No small feat. But you started in 1997, and then I was curious, when you started in shipping, were you that ambitious at the time? Did you have an idea of where you not necessarily get to where you are now? What was your thoughts back then, the early Thomas like?
So this is the moment of truth. To be quite honest, the reason why I started in shipping was purely by chance. I finished high school and I don't have a university degree. I was a bit tired of school when I left. I was sort of figuring out what to do, and my brother's best friend at that time, he was working for a shipping company. So he said, why don't you, and he explained to me what that was and traveling, seeing the world, and for me that sounded awesome. By that time, when I started applying for jobs within shipping, most of the trainee jobs at that stage was already taken. I was obviously, as always, out too late. I applied anyway. I applied for about 100 positions and I got 97 rejections. And there were 3 companies that actually wanted to take me in for an interview. 2 of them, I actually got the job, but I just didn't really like the way they handled the interview and didn't really like the culture of the company, so I said no. And then out of the blue, 2 weeks after I had rejected the 2 jobs, one of the companies that I applied for came back to me and said one of their trainees jumped out, that he didn't want to take the position. So they asked me for an interview, and I got the job there purely by chance. At that time, it was a Danish shipping company that was the 4th biggest in Denmark. We got AP Møller as number 1, so it was pretty much a decent-sized company with about 100 ships. So for me, it was a great start. So into shipping, purely by chance.
Okay. And was it 2001 that you went to the US?
Yeah, after the company unfortunately went bankrupt, where I started as a trainee, I went to the United States to work as a shipbroker. And that's the first time ever really leaving Denmark on my own for a longer period. At that time, I was still late 20s. So for me, it was about time to go out and actually see the world and experience it. And being away from my parents for a bit, so that my mom didn't have to wash my clothes all the time. To stand on my own 2 feet. And for me, it was probably still today the greatest experience of my life. I mean, when people talk about Houston, where I was stationed for about 1.5, 2 years, it's not the greatest place on earth. But for me, it's still magical. Being on your own, having some fantastic friends over there, and also working in a completely different market than just being a ship owner as a shipbroker, for me was a fantastic experience.
How did it come about? It's a big move. Were you looking for jobs over there?
Not at all. Again, a little bit by chance. One of the owner of the company was Danish, and he had this idea that every 2 years, we had a sort of a 2-year contract over there. And every 2 years, he would like to get a new Danish person in, preferably Danish. And simply by chance that I knew the guy that was working there, he asked, why don't you apply for the job? So we did a phone call, not a Zoom call. And I got the job. I think that's what at least I've taken with me since I started shipping, is that the opportunities that I've gotten, maybe except for the first 2 jobs I said no to, I've taken all the opportunities. I've never said no. I've never asked for more money. I've pretty much said, you know what? I'll have to show them that I'm capable of doing it, and then the money will come afterwards.
That's funny, actually. One of the things my dad always said to me since he used to always tell me to try and do things for free first. There's a right dad calm down, but yeah, I get it.
True.
You were out there for 2 years, Houston, naturally, completely different environment to what you're used to. But the reason why I asked this, I lived in WA, in Western Australia for a couple of years. I don't know what it's like to live in Copenhagen, but I felt as if there was a mentality that was different out there. I don't know whether it was because it's a young country or it was much more can do. People were supporting you and pushing you. Was everything just, again, taken by chance? But do you feel that your mentality was pushed forward when you were out in Houston?
For me, it was obviously an experience to get to know a different country. I've been traveling through my whole childhood, but being on vacation for me is not really learning or getting to know the country. So for me, it was a matter of getting to know who I really was. I had to buy a car. I had to get a driver's license. Even though I had one in Denmark, you still have to get another one over there. So for me, it was to get to know myself and figure out what I wanted in life. Getting to know the Houstonians was for me an eye-opener. I mean, the most friendly people in the world. At least that's how I left Houston. Every time I go back, there's still places that I miss a lot because They were extremely friendly, extremely helpful. I learned to stand on my own 2 feet, and I grew a lot mentally and professionally in those 2 years. And that's really what I take away from that experience.
When you left Houston, was that straight to Hong Kong?
No, because the company that I worked for that went bankrupt, they made a joint venture agreement with Laris and the company I work for today. So I came back to Copenhagen to work for that joint venture company. And within 6 months working there, Laris asked me whether I wanted to go out and work in the joint venture company they had in Hong Kong. Obviously, again, I just said yes. And that was another great experience.
Were you married then? Were you with your wife at that point?
No, actually, by chance. My neighbor in Houston, which was a girl, she had a friend coming over to visit from the UK for about 3 months. And that's my wife today. So because my neighbor, she worked night shifts at bars. Now wife, she was at home in the apartment most evenings. So I took her out for dinner and we did a lot of stuff together. And then we started sort of hitting it off. And then she left after the 3 months. And then we had this long distance relationship for about 6 months until I came back to Copenhagen. When I moved to Copenhagen, she moved in with me. Right. But almost immediately we moved together to Hong Kong. So Hong Kong was really the first time we ever really lived together, for good and bad, of course.
No comment. No, I'm not. My wife hasn't. She's listened to part of one, but I'm not going to put myself in it. Yes. Yeah, I mean, when you went to, how long were you out in Hong Kong? Was that
about 4 years? What
was your thoughts of Hong Kong? Did you enjoy it?
I absolutely loved it. But that was my second time out. The first one is still the one that matters the most to me. But Hong Kong at that time was still very English. We loved that part. And it's obviously a city whereby you get to work fairly early. You leave at 9, 10 o'clock in the evening, and you're not really bothered by it. We didn't have any kids at that time, so we both worked a lot, and then we went out for dinner almost every night because she didn't want to go home at 9, 10 o'clock to cook. And it was so cheap to eat out. And then you really experience Hong Kong from what it is. Yeah. A vibrant, fantastic city with a lot of nationalities everywhere. Another great experience.
Did you find it hard to adjust when you came back to Denmark? Or was it just like coming home, or did it feel like not coming home?
For me, the adjustment was tough because of my wife. Not being Danish, not speaking Danish, not having sort of any friends around her in the beginning, that was tough. Because obviously I came back and I was promoted to a very nice position, so I had a lot of stuff to do at work. But obviously her settling in was a lot more difficult. It's a lot easier, I believe, if you have kids, which we didn't at the time. So she was pretty much on her own a lot, and that was pretty tough for the both of us, no doubt about that. But moving back for me, job-wise, was another great experience and a big sort of jump for me, position-wise. So that was the reason why we went back. But from a family perspective, it was a lot more tough.
What was the position you came back to do?
I came back to head up the chartering department within Laris. And at that time, it consisted of about 10 charterers and also head of the operations, which was about 10 people as well. So I came from being on my own with a partner to now suddenly having the responsibility for about 20 people. On top of that, I was still reasonably young. And basically all of the people reporting to me had maybe 10, 15 years more experience than I have. And that was sort of the greatest challenge for me was to sort of make sure I did not tell them what to do and how to do it, because they already knew it. It was to come in with obviously a different mentality, and I've seen the world, maybe they hadn't. So we could look at things in a different perspective, but surely not trying to show them how to do things. They knew that already.
How do you manage that? When you're saying, obviously, for 10, 15 years more experience, that's a big... There must have been at least a couple of people that were maybe annoyed that they'd been overlooked for the job, so...
There was. But I think for me, the important part is they knew exactly what they were doing, and they were doing a very, very good job. I maybe also had the luxury that their previous boss was a very different character from me. Right. So they also needed a change. They've been working together for many, many years. They were very stuck in their own ways, and I sort of let them had a little bit more freedom than what they used to. But also, obviously, with experience that I had from working in Houston, with contacts with customers we never had before, also in the Far East, taking those contacts with me back, also showed that it was not just because I was very good friends with my boss. I actually brought back new ideas that they hadn't seen before and we hadn't discussed before. But I think the most important thing for them was that I did not go in and sort of change the way they were doing it. Yeah. I sort of implemented ideas on how we could look at it differently, but I never sort of changed their own ways. We did that over time.
Mate, it's a really random point, but Scotland, while we were recording this, it's a week after Scotland qualified for the Scotland manager. Scotland manager's a guy called Stevie Clark. He used to work with Jose Mourinho. And we were just a really random chat, but it was more about what it takes to really kind of get the most out of people. But he was saying, it's just like, tough and he's strict, but he's very supportive of you. It's not a case of, as you say, not trying to come in like a bull in a china shop and change everything and straight off. It's small things over time, but it's all about putting principles in place and then going forward. So it sounds like you're doing the same. It's obviously nice to hear, but I'd imagine it's a good foundation for where you've got to in your career so far.
For me, it was also a matter of the previous management was very much that he made all the decisions and they just basically followed what he was doing. And I have a completely different view on it. They're the ones that should have all the ideas. They're closer to the customers than I am because I'm sort of management and they are sitting with the customers every day. So for me, it was turning it around saying, why don't you tell me how we should do it? And suddenly you could lift them up a bit compared to them just being told what to do.
Yeah.
And very quickly, I think we realized that relationship actually worked very well. It doesn't work everywhere, but it worked for us.
It's a brave move, but if you've got a good team, then surely they're going to have the experience, as you say they did have, to implement their own ideas as well. But at what point did you realize that you wanted to, did you just keep saying yes? Did you realize that you wanted to be the top of the tree or go as far as you can? Or was there any point where you're like, I'm pretty happy where I am and I don't really want to push further? Or is that not really you?
No, I think up until the time when I left Hong Kong, I was extremely happy with what I was doing. I did not have ambition to become CEO of a company. I wanted still to see the world. I still wanted to be challenged, but I still felt that working in Houston, working in Hong Kong, also going back to Copenhagen again eventually would still challenge me. So I never had that sort of that ladder, that sort of ambition. That came when I went back to Copenhagen, but only after a year or 2 years in the role, because what I realized was I moved away from being hands-on chartering, i.e. dealing with the customers, doing freight rates, fixing ships, until becoming management, where you don't do any of those things. In the first 6 months to a year, I really missed it. It was very, very difficult for me to sit in the corner, not having any sort of dealings on a day-to-day basis. I still was selling ships, I was buying ships, I was doing long-term charm charters and stuff, but I was never doing the day-to-day stuff. And I missed it. So it was only when I sort of realized it is not too bad. It's not the most interesting thing in the world to continue doing the same thing. And after I realized that, then I got a little bit more ambitious. I started educating myself a lot more since I don't have a university degree. It was important for me still to sort of build on my experiences from traveling and also growing in my role. I needed to have some education to back it up. So I started taking business courses that helped me a lot in growing in my career.
What year are we talking here?
In 2006, 2007.
As I said to you, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile last night and obviously just kind of going through your career. It was almost like a steady every 2-year promotion. How did it all play out? There must be a lot of stories in between all of it. So how did it all play out for you?
For all of us, money matters. Yeah. But for me, it hasn't come first always. The job itself, or you can say the job scope, the people around me has meant a lot more. If I can see I'm growing professionally, I know the money will come. If my performance lives up to the role, I was in no doubt about that. Laris is a fantastic company to work for. They look after you. We have great benefits working there. That's also why if you look at our company, a lot of people have been there for 40 years. You don't see that anymore. The young people, they change more often, and that's also what they should do. It's a great company to work for. And I knew that the company would take care of me if I just had a good performance. But luck is also important, Gordon. Sometimes your boss, he gets a new job or he gets a new role, and if you have done a good performance, then he looks at you. So a little bit of luck, also good performance, of course, but also making sure that it doesn't help constantly being knocking on the door to your boss's office saying, I want more money, I want more of this, I want more of that. A lot of people get tired of it. And that's not how you should grow your career. Have a great performance, stay loyal, and then it will come.
Couldn't put it any better there. You see that in so many different industries. You've said luck a few times, but I don't know how much I buy into it, if I'm honest. There's got to be a lot more to it than that. If you've got a good relationship with your boss, and if your boss is obviously good, and your boss is going to be going, then it's maybe not strategic, but there's a different kind of intelligence to be part of that and to do that.
For me as well, education is also money, because that's something the company is prepared for you to go out on a very expensive business course. The company is paying for that. So for me, that's also, they believe in you, they would like to grow you. And for me, that's actually the same as getting more money, because that's something you can put on your CV and you can use it later on.
When it comes to coming back, and then was it 2015 that you became COO?
2016.
I've seen one of the headlines. It was just like, what's this blue-eyed boy? It's obviously a reputation that you've earned that, or?
No, I know. I have blue eyes, fair enough. But it actually goes back, I think, 10 years, 15 years maybe. And there was an interview with one of the journalists from TradeWinds.
Yeah.
He wrote an article about me and about Laursen, and the headline was "The Guy with the Bluest Eyes in Shipping." That's not, in a very male-dominated industry, that's not really what you want this journalist to say. So I've got a lot of stick for that, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's what I thought when I read it. I was like, that's a bit cheeky, is it not?
Yeah, I did not read that article before he posted it.
So obviously going in as CEO, again, when you come into that position, obviously you're head of operations as well, I believe, beforehand. Did anything change in terms of your mentality from when you came back from Hong Kong? I don't mean for personally, I just mean like building the team and allowing the team to do things. Was there anything that you had to be really hands-on in? Was it almost a case of stepping back and allowing more and more people to do the same?
No, I think every time over the years I stepped into a new role, it's always been a little bit of butterflies in my stomach, because you wanted to do the best and you wanted to show people around you that the decision the company made to get you into the new role was the right decision. So you didn't want to make any mistakes. I've also seen that I have gotten out of it really well every single time. So when the opportunity came up in Laris, we had at that time 2 business units, gas and dry cargo, and I was the head of gas. The company decided that they wanted to find a new guy for the dry cargo space. And it was at a time where there was a lot of turmoil within the dry cargo industry, but also at our company, we were losing quite a lot of money. And the people working there were not very satisfied. So I sort of saw that as an opportunity, because I worked for the company for many years. I knew a lot of the guys on the dry cargo side, so said, this might be the next step in my career, to step into a new territory, dry cargo, that I never tried before. But again, I knew that the guys working there, they have the knowledge about the market. What I need to do is steer the vessel in the right direction and show them the direction, give them support, and make sure that they have a stable work environment. And that was, for me, the next step in my career, I thought.
What were your biggest challenges when you went in there, other than what you're saying there?
I mean, obviously I have to be careful not to talk negatively about my company, but I have to admit that I came in at a time where there was a lot of frustration. There was a lot of people that were leaving the company. We were losing a lot of money. So for me, it was a matter of trying to rebuild it. I knew I had the capabilities of doing that because of actually the way I am. That was the most important thing. And then it was not to grow the company. It was to make sure we stopped the bleeding, that we stopped losing money and start making money again, and give the power back to the guys on the desk. And they believed in me, they believed in the direction that we were taking.
You're losing a lot of people when you're trying to build your teams. What are the key things that you look for when you're bringing people in? Obviously within different positions, if you're looking for people, I suppose it wouldn't be you that would be doing it, but if you're looking for people to come in and run teams that you are going to be, are you looking to promote from within, or are you looking to take people in from other areas to spread a bit in positivity or enthusiasm, or coming in from profitable companies?
There's not one size that fits all, but I would say in general terms, I will always look internally first, because there are in all companies very, very good guys there. But I will also say that the best chartering guy might not be the best in a leadership role. Maybe he's just a specialist that should be exactly where he is. Pay him a lot of money because he's very good at it, but don't promote him into a role where you take him further away from what he's very, very good at. So that's always a part of me, that just because you're good at something doesn't mean you can take the next step. But I will always look internally before I look externally. But there might be cases whereby, even though you have a good internal candidate, you need to sort of shake things up a bit. And the only way you can shake things up is getting somebody from the outside. If you just promote from the inside all the time, the culture will never change. And sometimes it is important that the culture changes, because you have to sort of follow what's happening around you. And you don't do that if you are in your little family all the time. You need to move outside that and also see what's happening out there. So you cannot continue to sort of grow internally. You also have to look externally. What we achieved back then was that, I think Laursen was back then even more, a very conservative company. We didn't hire a lot of foreigners. It was more complicated. What about the culture? What if? I did not really care too much about that. So when I was there, we hired even English. We hired Germans. We hired the Dutch guys coming in. And again, I think now we have a much more international environment. And you know what? It has changed the culture a lot, but it is a lot more fun to work there now, because we get lots of different inputs. They're able to speak their own language with the customers. So we get a lot more support from the Italian guy that speaks Italian with Italian clients than a Danish guy trying to explain it in English. I think we're benefiting a lot from that by being a lot more diverse.
Looking back, it's an incredible journey. Are there any key decisions that you look back and think are pivotal to the career itself?
Not really. I think the important part, as I mentioned, that I have managed to get the opportunities. I've said yes to all of them. You can say, well, that's easy because you've got the opportunities. Yes, but if I look around today, I have a number of people I have given the opportunity, for instance, to work at our Singapore office. And a lot of the young guys today, they say no. They have to leave their friends, or they've got a new girlfriend they would like to stay. And I said, well, that's fine. But I'm not going to hang around asking you in 1 or 2 years' time. If you don't want to do it, fine, I fully respect that. But then the chance will go to somebody else. That's not because they're not ambitious. That's just, you can say, other things in their mind right now that is more important. Maybe I was lucky that time. I didn't have a girlfriend, so I could just go. But I think I would have said yes anyway. Because I think if you want to, I think it's important for the young people to get outside their home country, to experience what it's like to be away from friends and family, to live on your own, to live in a different culture, to experience the world in a different way. And I'm sorry, going on vacation or going on Interrail for 2 months, it is just not the same. So for me, get out there, and that's why shipping is fantastic. There are endless opportunities. Maybe not during Corona time, but there's endless of opportunities.
I couldn't agree more with that. I would say if you ask myself, you ask my wife, the best decision we ever made in our life, it was to go and live in Australia and not do the typical just go on tour. We worked, we integrated, we made friends in the country. I played Aussie rules, for God's sake. I'd never played it in my life, but
exactly.
Basically started in defence. So like, we'll just keep the foreigner back there, but halfway through the season I was playing midfield. But I don't think I can't see it being a bad decision to go and obviously just... That's why I was asking you, obviously, do you think that your time in Houston and Hong Kong helped you change your mentality or whatnot? But yeah.
I don't think I would be here today with the job I have now if I hadn't taken the jobs in Houston and in Hong Kong. I really don't think so. My salary in Houston was $3,000 a month. And I basically spent my whole childhood savings in 2 years because I had no money there. Yeah. I mean, all my sort of fixed costs, they were about $3,000. So I had no money to myself. It was definitely not because the money was good. It was simply because of the experience.
It's a lesson for so many. Within Laris and Cozain, are you always looking for young talent to bring in? Is there anything like almost like a trainee program, etc. there? Yeah.
No, we have actually changed our ways a bit. What we do is that we take trainees in from mostly Copenhagen Business School, which is one of the only universities or business schools where shipping is a big part of it. That's why we take in people with a bit more background from shipping than what we have done in the past. But we also take them in as trainees. And we try to take in 2, 3, 4 trainees a year. So they're with us for about 15 hours a week. So it's not a lot of work they're able to do, but they get to know the company. They spread the rumors about the company that they get to do this, and it's a good environment to be in. So when they finish their degree, a lot of them are applying for jobs with us because they've already been there. I know that, and I appreciate that a lot, that the people that work for Cozain now, they have to spend a lot of time educating the young guys and girls to get to know the systems and get to know the job they're asked to do. But we can see it comes back tenfold with the number of applications we get from the young guys when they're done. It makes me quite proud that we're able to give them good education, and they like it that much, they actually want to come back. So this young talent is extremely important.
Of course, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. An interesting call yesterday with a company out in Asia, and that's exactly what they were saying. It was just like, we need to do more succession plan. We need to be basically thinking ahead and bringing in more and more young talent and supporting them and allowing them the space and the time to develop. So as obviously now as CEO, was there a moment when you found out was you in your office? How did it come about?
I was fishing in Norway.
It's like a scene from a movie.
We come from earning $3,000 in Houston, having no money, to fishing in Norway. So things are not too bad. No, it was actually during fishing in Norway. At that time, boss asked me whether I wanted to take over the company.
Was he fishing with you?
He was fishing with me. We had about 10 clients with us. And then he decided at the time the two of us were fishing together to ask me whether I wanted to do it.
I take it was an easy decision?
No, I obviously told him if the money was right, I would consider it. Yeah. But no, I said yes, of course.
That was the first time that you asked for more money?
I did.
Did you catch anything?
I did, yes. It was only, I think, about 2 kilos. But it was enough. The CEO job was bigger.
You were bringing in the rod with your hand shaking? So obviously that was 2017, so 3 years, depending on when it was. How's it been? What's your proudest moments so far?
I think because the company itself has been struggling a bit financially, it has been to make sure that we have a very high retention rate of the people working for us, which I'm proud of, you can say, in tough times. But I also think that we have managed to at least improve our bottom line considerably over the last 2 years, which I'm quite proud of. In tough markets, and Corona, believe me, has not helped, but that we are coming out of it.
And in terms of coronavirus there, how's that affected everything? Obviously, it's massively affected every part of your operation, but how did you handle it all when it first came through?
We are, within my segment, heavily dependent on that You and I, Gordon, we go out and we spend money. We have a world economy that is growing at a decent pace, that the different, you can say, major nations are behaving and actually doing business with each other. And we can safely say that that's not the case over the last 12 months. So I think the smaller gas side, which we are part of, has been very heavily affected by it. And 2020 has been probably the worst year we've had in 10, 15 years. It's tough.
Going forward, is it looking better towards the end of the year?
I think because we have managed to change our ways of doing things, things are looking better. And I think we have realized is that the corona pandemic is, yes, it's with us still. We are probably middle through, or at least in the beginning of what we call the second wave. But I think we have learned to live with it a lot better. There are fewer lockdowns now than you saw first time around. Yeah. Now you're probably almost through the second round of lockdown. So we believe that 2021 is going to be quite much better, or significantly better than what we've seen in 2020.
Where do you think Laris and Cozain needs to get to for the future to be successful?
We're definitely moving into, you can say, bigger ships. Our biggest ship is about 12,000 deadweight, which is quite small. And I believe we need to double the size in terms of the ships that we are running over the next 3 to 5 years. Right. Simply because the running cost for smaller ships that we have today is the same as a ship that is twice the size. And obviously the earning capabilities of a bigger ship is much higher than a small ship. So we need to move into bigger sizes because our industry is heavily regulated. It's all, you can say, controlled by the Shell and the Equinor and the BPs, so the biggest companies in the world. And we are very, very small fish. And they have more and more regulations coming in, and that costs us a lot more money. So we need to move up in size, I believe, going forward.
Is that going to be through new building or buying second-hand vessels? Or
I think it's going to be a combination of those, but also preferably with a partner. And that can be with an existing owner, or it can be with a financial investor. We don't need to grow the company ourselves. We can easily grow it together with somebody else.
Is there anyone that you look to and is a real mentor for you?
I would say mentors. I've learned a lot from the 3 to 4 bosses I've had during my career. And I think all of them have been okay. But I think a combination of the 4 have been phenomenal. I'm trying to sort of pinpoint the best things from each. And that's who I'm trying to be. Right. I know that sounds a bit sort of cheesy, but I had one boss that was extremely knowledgeable about the market. But he was a real asshole. He was really, really bad to his colleagues, to me, but he was very knowledgeable. I had another guy that was the best boss you can imagine, but he could not deal with conflicts. He would do anything he could to avoid them. Sort of trying to take all the good points, not the bad points, but all the good points from there, sort of how they mentored me or how they sort of worked with me. And that's the person I'm trying to be. I try to reach out to people, and I know it's easier said than done. I like to have criticism because then I know that at least I can try and change. It's always nice if somebody says, "Oh, you're doing a fantastic job," but I can't really use that for anything. I would rather have people coming up to me saying, "What you said there, I disagree with." Fine. So and I would always appreciate criticism, even though it might be harsh. I'd rather have that than people coming up to me saying you're doing a good job.
You don't learn?
I don't.
A bigger ego, and
it's great for the ego. That's it. Believe me, it's big enough.
I think you seem really down to earth. I'm not going to go there.
You assume does, huh?
That's it. Yep. It makes that light stand out as well.
Exactly.
Is there any external influences or anything that you look to?
No, I think my wife, obviously, she has been extremely, first of all, supportive, but also it's always been an intelligent part of our relationship. So it's always been good to bounce ideas with her on many things. And she's pretty good at keeping my ego down when it sort of gets a little bit too big.
Irish, so that's the same as Scots. You're not allowed an ego here, I don't think.
No, exactly. And she's got a temper, which you probably not a surprise. But no, she's been a huge influence, no doubt about that. But what I've sort of been trying to establish over the years is to have quite a number of friendships in the industry with clients most of the time. And I'm not saying I get favors from it, but it doesn't hurt. And I'm not friends with them to get sort of a better return for our company. I seem to just like the guys that are out there. Yeah. And I've managed to be on very good footing with a lot of them.
It's not part of the questions, but I don't want to miss this one. Your background in the commercial side of it, do you think that's an important thing? Like everything these days is we use it within what you do, the automation, the digital stuff. And do you think it's still important or equally or even more important now to remember the personal side and build the relationships and not just commercially, but... I think it's extremely important. I went on a management course in New York some moons back, and the guy asked the question whether it was about power. And he said, so
what is a leader in today's world? What does he need to have? So the little guy in the background said, I think he needs to have empathy. The general walked over to him and he said, listen, if you believe empathy is a part of a leader today, you are a effing something else. So I think it all depends on who you ask what's important. For me, empathy is extremely important. That's also one of the values within our company. It's empathy towards your customers, it's empathy towards the crew members that we are sort of struggling to get back, but also towards customers. It is a very sort of important part for me. And I do believe that I do spread empathy when I am speaking and when I'm also dealing with people.
That's nice to hear. Last question then, before I let you go on and get your dinner. What's the first memory you've got within shipping from your childhood or going on your first vessel? Any stories that spring to mind?
Probably two stories. One, which was a massive embarrassment, sitting in an office with 50 other people, and it was fairly quiet, and I was on the phone, one of the first phone calls as a trainee, speaking to one of the brokers in London, and he said, so how's the weather? As you do. Yeah. And I said, it's beautiful. There is no sky. I meant clouds. The whole office was sort of, yeah. But other than that, I had to, within my first year, I had an experience of joining a ship down in the Keeler Canal that was going to Finland for loading. And while we went through the Baltic Sea, it ended up being minus 42 degrees. We were sitting in the middle of the ice. We couldn't move. We were waiting for an icebreaker. And we can go out within 10, 15 minutes. The whole sort of area, both in front or behind the ship, was completely iced over. And for me, that moment where we were sitting there, you can see the inside of the ship was starting to freeze. You can go outside. You can see the ship from the outside walking on the ice. It was dead silent. For me, that's one of the greatest moments I've ever experienced.
Were you scared?
No, you had the whole crew around you that was very experienced, and since they were just saying this is just a normal day for us, so I was very relaxed.
I think it's incredible to think of some of the situations and you forget, and then you see, it's easy for me to forget just doing what I do, but you see some of the guys posting videos or some people send me videos. I actually got a guy, he's an ETO, he's on one of the Yamal vessels. He sent me a picture, obviously way up north. It's just incredible. It's like, can't believe that's happening right now. Obviously, you see the swell, and it's like an incredible industry.
Yeah, it is.
Thomas, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you making the time and coming on. Thanks again. And if anyone, obviously, if we've got anyone that's listening and wants to get in touch or wants to do business with Laris and Cozain, what would you say is the best way to go?
I would say shoot me an email. You have my email, Gordon. That's more than fine by me. And I will happily listen to any. If somebody wants to apply for a job, or somebody wants to hear a bit more about the company or anything, feel free.
Thanks again, Thomas.
Thank you, Gordon.